Only imagine what it was like for someone in the early 20th century to see the alien sights of the deep for the first time, especially when you consider that the men were observing the abyss in a heavily altered state of mind, as both were battered and concussed from a bumpy voyage down. Perhaps it's no surprise then that not all the fish they claim to have seen have been identified.
Hey, hello, how's it going? I'm back again. I'm going to talk about what lies in the ocean deep. Well, I'm going to react to that. It looks like a pretty well thought out video. Very interesting. I haven't watched all of it. I just skimmed some here and there. I'm going to watch most of it with you. Hopefully we'll reach the end. If not, that's okay. And without further ado,
the term thalassophobia means an intense fear of deep water. It is one of the most primal and understandable phobias, for the dark abyss has always been a birthplace of monsters. Lurking below the waves are not only bizarre species known to science, but a vast multitude of imagined leviathans. Something about the fathomless void floods the human mind with visions of nightmarish creatures, which have scared and fascinated us since we first gazed into the deep. So, for this entry into the archive, we'll dive into depths both real and imagined, and discover what terrors lurk within the heart of the sea.
I don't know if it's so much the water that's scary. I mean, I know that's that word. I'm not going to try to pronounce it again. It means afraid of the deep, but deep water. But even without the water, if it was just dark and you were floating like you were floating in space, that still seems to be somewhat unnerving. And again, I guess space doesn't seem unnerving, but something about like going down somewhere seems unnerving, like even going down into a cave.
Beginning your descent. Cruising depth in runway 40 seconds. Stand by.
I'll begin with the game Iron Lung, where you play as a convict sealed inside a cramped submarine, exploring depths so far below the vessel's safety limit that the only window has to be welded shut. It's a good starting point because despite its retro-style graphics, I believe that, short of falling into the Mariana Trench, it's the closest you can get to experiencing the terror of the deep sea firsthand. Iron Lung takes place in the wake of an event called the Quiet Rapture, in which every known star and habitable planet just vanished, leaving behind only those who were on space stations, and one remaining moon is now covered in what seems to be an ocean of blood, and it's this ocean you're diving beneath. Very relaxing stuff. With the window welded shut, your only way of navigating is using a primitive radar system that pings when you're near a wall. But soon, you start to get pings even when you're in open water. The sole method of checking what's out there is using a camera that essentially works like an old Polaroid, taking a few nail-biting seconds to process the image. At first, despite the pings on the radar, you see no monsters, but you do see other things. Mysterious bones that defy explanation, twisting structures that almost resemble pipes, even, impossibly, what seems to be the remains of a building, until eventually you take a picture, and in the corner, it's hard to convey how frightening this moment is.
It's funny, I was just talking about space, but I haven't seen this part of this game. But yeah, it does look pretty retro. And that would be pretty scary. You know, to remake this game with the new virtual reality tech, that would be pretty awesome. And it'd probably be more real. I don't want to say realistic. A lot of virtual reality now, it depends on where you go. It still looks kind of cheap. I mean, nothing like this, of course. It looks way better than this. But to make a VR version of this, I think that would be really fun to try out, even to put on your Oculus, or even at the like a Dave and Buster somewhere.
Because of the delay, you know that the creature might be right on top of you, but you take another picture and it's gone, like there was nothing there at all. As you continue, despite the vastness of the sea around you, the interior of the sub comes to feel paradoxically claustrophobic, made worse by malfunctions like sudden electrical fires. Later, the vessel starts flooding, blood rising up to your waist. Eventually, a huge object appears on the radar, and when you go to take a photo, this was about where I hit my limit, which is a testament to how expertly Iron Lung uses its minimalist mechanics to simulate the terror of the crushing depths. While its ocean of blood is of course fictional, the dread it conjures seems drawn from real encounters with the deep sea. Frightening experiences with the ocean aren't anything new. Stories of sea monsters, likely inspired by fleeting encounters with abyssal marine life, have existed since our first days of seafaring, but for much of history, many regarded the idea of life surviving in the deep as superstition. In the 19th
That was kind of funny, the picture of them firing a cannon at the giant fish. I thought it was funny for some reason.
century, the popular abyssus theory proposed by naturalist Edward Forbes held that no species could exist deeper than 300 meters, or 1,000 feet below the ocean surface. While later studies would contradict this idea, it wasn't until 1930 that someone attempted to dive below such depths to see for themselves. Naturalist William Beebe, alongside Otis Barton, plunged further into the abyss than any human had before, in a metal tank called the bathysphere. And what they
Talk about claustrophobic. The two of them? Like, if you gotta take a leak, ooh. A bottle? I don't know.
saw changed science forever. Fish that flashed with bioluminescent color, see-through predators of the deep, surreal invertebrates that glided on fantastical fins. One can only imagine what it was like for someone in the early 20th century to see the alien sights of the deep for the first time, especially when you consider that the men were observing the abyss in a heavily altered state of mind, as both were battered and concussed from a bumpy voyage down. Perhaps it's no surprise, then, that not all the fish they claimed to have seen had been identified. Beebe stated he saw a bizarre creature named the five-lined constellation fish, and while no such species has ever been spotted again, the description bears a striking resemblance to a deep-sea comb jelly, which Beebe might have interpreted as a fish, unable to comprehend its true form. Even more incredibly, Beebe claimed that two giant dragonfish larger than the sub itself swam by, which have also never been documented since. It's possible that once again, Beebe saw another deep-sea species and misidentified it, or it's possible that these giants have simply eluded detection. In either case, the bathysphere's descent and others like it flooded the public consciousness with visions of the watery depths. Over the next few decades, numerous leviathans rose up from the abyss and into early cinema, with movies about aquatic monsters terrorizing the land becoming exceedingly popular. One of the most famous of these films was the 1954 adaptation of Jules Verne's 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, a movie with origins even older than the bathysphere. The novel it's based on comes from 1870 and actually predicted the invention of submarines, making it foundational to all sci-fi interpretations of the deep sea. Leading into the modern era, the vast majority of films about the ocean have continued to portray it as a hostile realm. Nearly everything about the uncharted depths
So why wouldn't we fear the deep when we have to watch these movies that show monsters coming out of the ocean? I mean, they kind of program fear into you, but I'm sure a realistic experience of the sailors would probably do the same if once they told their stories or wrote their books.
lends itself to horror, from the crushing pressure to the low visibility to the bizarre creatures that swim in the gloom. The deep sea can be so alien, some works of sci-fi have imagined it as home to literal aliens. In James Cameron's The Abyss, humans make first contact with a group of advanced aquatic extraterrestrials who settled in Earth's oceans long ago. The film seems to take inspiration from In the Abyss by early sci-fi novelist H.G. Wells, in which an explorer discovers a similar hidden society of intelligent, undersea beings. Perhaps it should come as no surprise the ocean is portrayed as a hideaway for extraterrestrials, as many real deep-sea species seem like they'd be right at home on another planet. Take, for example, the barrel-eye fish, an animal with translucent skin that allows it to look upwards through its head to spot prey. Or the vampire squid, a cephalopod whose underside is covered with fearsome-looking spikes to ward off predators.
Now that would be scary, just to see something like that. I also find it interesting. A lot of our internet technology now utilizes the cables they kind of like stamp at the bottom of the ocean. And I remember a couple of years ago I read a article about they were having issues with sometimes sharks would bite these cables because sometimes the cables would kind of illuminate once in a while and it would garner the attention of sharks. And well, they assumed it was sharks. I don't know. They didn't show a video, but then they said sometimes the cables would sustain some slight damage because the sharks would bite them out of curiosity, and they would require repair. So that makes me wonder, like, imagine having to repair that, or even, well, the initial installation of those cables, I think they say they have these giant machines that stamp them into the ocean, kind of like a stapler. That's pretty interesting in itself and for another video, but I just thought about that when I saw these illuminated creatures, and then connecting the idea that, you know, our internet across the ocean pretty much crosses a lot of this territory, or maybe it's a higher elevation than this because the ocean is pretty deep.
The life forms of the depths can be so unsettling, it's understandable that most media interprets it as a terrifying realm. Yet a greater understanding of the oceans hasn't just led to fearful artistic reactions. Abzu is a soothing video game that makes a stirring case for the beauty of the undersea realm. Following the voyage of a diver through stunning marine environments, the gameplay involves no combat or survival mechanics. Instead, you spend your time drifting through shoals of simulated fish, taking the flipper of a porpoise and leaping over the waves, or diving with giants of the deep.
This would be another nice virtual reality experience, especially if they could enhance it. Like you put on the suit basically, and you actually feel like you're in the water. I guess this would be more fit for a ride like at Disney World, or what are those other places? These theme parks. Like you get into a particular apparatus, you put on a suit, and it basically floats you, or maybe somehow you're carried. It feels like you're in the ocean, but you're not.
Abzu invites you into the beating heart of the ocean, where every moment thrums with the rhythm of life. At the same time, it is a game that politely asks you to let your mind wander, to let go of your fears and meditate on the calm vistas around you. But even in the cheeriest and most brightly lit renderings of the ocean, there are often moments where the dread of the vast abyss creeps in. One major example of this appears in Beyond Blue, an underwater exploration game where you catalog different species of marine life. Compared to Abzu, Beyond Blue takes a less stylized but equally peaceful approach.
Can be unintentionally unsettling. Perhaps the ultimate example of accidental horror is Subnautica, a series that plunges you into the alien seas of a distant planet. Subnautica and its sequel bring you face to face with so many nightmarish aquatic predators they're often described as horror games, or at least horror adjacent. Yet that wasn't the intention when the game was in initial development.
Yeah, horror adjacent sounds pretty appropriate. Even though it says it wasn't the intention, I'm curious as to what the intention was.
Originally, Subnautica was planned to be a more relaxed cruise through an aquatic realm, but early testers kept getting frightened by the unknown depths, leading developers to realize the potential the game had as a more intense experience. Yet the power of Subnautica comes from more than just jump scares. The game will stun you with the vastness of megafaunal filter feeders, befuddle you with the bizarreness of unclassifiable oddities, and bewilder you with the blurred light of bioluminescent wonders. Though not set on Earth, perhaps more than any game, Subnautica presents the experience of the ocean in its totality, a realm that inspires both awe and terror. I think it's curious, then, that despite crafting a painstakingly complex, diverse biosphere of simulated life, Subnautica is typically remembered as a game designed only to terrify. In today's market, Subnautica doesn't seem like it should be able to frighten audiences. There is no killer chasing you, no axe-wielding maniac just around the corner. Threats that are much closer to us land dwellers than something thousands of feet below the waves. And yet the dread that Subnautica evokes can be overwhelming, all-encompassing, to the point where you forget the more peaceful parts of the ocean and vow to never dip a toe in the water again.
I guess it's more the appearance of a lot of the creatures, especially the deep sea ones. They just have a pretty menacing look to them. So I think that's what is the frightening part. Also, again, as I mentioned, the darkness. I don't think it's as frightening as when you have the clear blue ocean around you. You can see at all degrees or all angles, 12 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 9 o'clock. Or basically you have a 360 degree view as you turn around. As opposed to you're in the dark, you can only feel if you're up or down. Or, sitting, standing, floating, vertical.
Even when the ocean isn't presented as something frightening, the vast majority of humans still feel some uneasiness towards the immeasurable deep. In regions where the light dims and visibility drops off, our rational mind fades out and our animal mind checks in and gets to work frightening us.
Oh, what do you know? I was just mentioning this. As I've said before, I haven't seen this. I just saw one clip here and there, but yeah, it's funny how there was a nice segue.
Conjuring images of immense leviathans twisting just out of sight. Of course, it doesn't help that there are leviathans in the depths. Abyssal gigantism is the scientific term for the tendency of deep-sea dwelling animals to grow far larger than their shallow water relatives. While there are some proposed explanations for this phenomenon, the inaccessibility of abyssal habitats means that there's still much we don't know about the giants of our own oceans. It can make you feel like anything might be down there. And that can cause problems. A few years ago, an infamous Discovery Channel documentary took advantage of the ocean's potential to conceal monsters and suggested the long-extinct shark, the megalodon, still swam in the oceans. This concept gained so much traction in the public eye that it seemingly inspired The Meg, a movie in which a somehow still-living megalodon attacks modern beachgoers. While it's easy to laugh at the fact that so many people believed a prehistoric shark still lived that a major studio made a multi-million-dollar blockbuster about it, this cultural phenomenon shows the power of the ocean's unknowable vastness to trigger human imagination.
Again, they're always showing us something frightening. I just wonder, what if they programmed our minds to see the ocean as this peaceful, calm, non-threatening place? Like, how would that change our perspective? Like, if we just focus on that mostly. I'm not saying you should, I'm not saying we shouldn't. I just wonder how would that configure our brains to think, or what bend would it give us? Like, if we never had these monster movies, shark movies, these things that we pay so we can feel the dopamine of fear rush through our system.
Yet many of us had our trust shattered years earlier, with the release of a mockumentary called Mermaids: The Body Found. This widely aired faux documentary sets out to convince you that mermaids are real hominids descended from aquatic apes, and for the time, it was pretty convincing. Using fake cave paintings, manufactured artifacts, and even full CGI recreations to lend plausibility to the absurd concept. The film honestly goes so far into fictional mermaid biology, it almost feels like a work of speculative evolution. It even folds in real-world unusual phenomena, like the bloop, and claims they were the result of mermaids.
That's a whole other video, because there are people that believe that they're in existence, and there are other YouTube channels that cover that. Just thought it would be interesting from a scientific point of view to check it out. Okay, I'm gonna stop there. I don't want to take up more of your time, as I have have already taken up a lot. I guess that is a matter of perspective. But I just want to thank you for your time. I appreciate it. And please like and subscribe. Shout out to my 2 returning watchers. Thank you so much for sticking it out with me. Thank you so much, and have a good one.